Today on Nova Legends podcast, I have cycling coach Jill Patterson back with me again. Jill is one of the most interesting people I've talked to in my 3 or 4 years of doing this podcast. Jill left a very storied career doing lots of different things to become a professional coach, advising her clients on what ways to meet their goals with the bike. Jill, great to see you again. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. I'm super excited. Thanks for asking me back.
Oh, of course. Well, I gave a little bit of your background, but I remember you're Bard educated. When I asked you what sports you played when you were young, you said I was an academic. I focused on schoolwork. And then, when you were in Japan, you started to ride because it was the easiest, most accessible way for you to exercise and to meet your fitness goals. Then there you got into racing, first touring, and then eventually some racing. And then you came back. And one thing I should have mentioned, you're a three-time Gran Fondo national champion, which is amazing. For folks who don't know and didn't see the first interview, it's kind of a mass start, really interesting race. Male, female, everyone kind of starts together, and then there could be a race within the race, or sometimes it's keyed on the end, and depending on which Fondo you're doing. Anyway, you're a three-time champ, which is amazing. Anyway, Jill, did I get most of that correct? Kind of your background, general sketches?
Yeah, like to a T.
Oh, wow.
That was excellent. Thank you.
Oh, that's easy. Well, look, first of all, we talked about this offline a little bit. Just quickly remind us how you became a cycling coach, and you're a full-time coach. You had different careers before, so why don't we talk about that first?
Okay, so yes, I had many different careers. In college, I was a math major, and then I was a math teacher for a couple of years through a few different programs. And then I went to Japan and I had a coffee shop there. I ran that for about 5 years. That's where I discovered cycling. I came back to the US because I'd lived abroad for so many years, like 10 years. I sort of just needed to get my feet back on the ground. And I had been teaching English also in Japan. So having a coffee shop and teaching English, that was not really a career I could bring back to the US. So when I got back here, I just was sort of like, let's figure out what I want to do. I had some ideas, but in the meantime, I was like, well, I love cycling. I'm going to keep cycling. Let's be a coach on the side that I can do that part-time. I was not planning on being a full-time coach at all. And then I also worked at some bike shops. I drove for Uber and Lyft for a bit. I just had a bunch of different jobs. I worked with someone with city planning. I've also worked in an accounting office before. I was a ski instructor, done a bunch of different jobs.
That's awesome.
And then I was juggling about three jobs with the coaching, and the coaching really, I loved it. And that was starting, I had opened my own business and that was just starting to grow. And about 3 or 4 years ago, it got to a point where I thought, okay, I can do this full time. I can support myself. I'm lucky enough to live in this area where there is such a huge cycling community. So because I live here, I believe that's why I can successfully be a full-time coach. So I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, well, you're very good at it. I've learned a lot, definitely in our talks. Generally, the last time we talked was right at the end of the pandemic, and cycling did very well in the pandemic, just because well, the races might not have been all conducted, but it was a great way to get exercise. There was plenty of social distancing in cycling, so it really did well. Bike shops were empty of bikes because people were buying all the bikes. We're cycling now. I go out and do my 15, 16-mile ride a few times a week, and I see a lot of cyclists. But has cycling remained strong in the last 2 or 3 years?
I believe it has. Of course, we had a big influx of people who cycled in the pandemic just to do something, and a lot of those have dropped out. But that was more of just like, the hobby cyclists that they were never intending to race or do much with it. But then we definitely have the people where they started and they're like, I love this. And I've actually onboarded several people recently who, when I ask them, what is your cycling history? They say, well, I started cycling in the pandemic and I just absolutely loved it. And here a couple of years later, I want to level up. I'm doing the group rides. I want to try racing. So We got some people dropping out, some people getting more into it. And then the people who were into cycling before the pandemic are very much still into cycling, and racing is coming back and travel trips. And there are just so many resources and out there for people and so many different events, which I love. Like as a coach, I'm not just coaching racers. I'm not just coaching people who are doing travel trips. I'm coaching so many different things. I coach someone to bike across country. Like how fun is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was always my dream before I started kind of going down the racing rabbit hole. Um, the people that do seek coaching now, Michael Lewis has got a great podcast on coaching. I think I've mentioned this to you before, and it just talks about the different types of coaching and how, a long time ago it was considered cheating to have a coach in sports. This is back in the 1800s, and then uh, and even it stayed that way for a long time. It was almost like athletics were pure, and coaching was an unfair leg up. Now there's coaching in everything. There's coaching on how to be funny. There's coaching on how to make conversation. There's executive coaches. There's every type of coach. Now, in terms of cycling coach, what type of personality seeks a coach? You mentioned that you coach all different types of cyclists, and there's probably dozens of different types of cyclists with the gravel, with the racing, with the touring, with the mountain biking, and whatever. But what type of personality seeks a coach?
I would say a lot of my athletes have a growth personality. They really are focused on self-improvement. Like as a coach, some coaches they really try to push their athletes to grow. I don't have to do that because if they're seeking me out, they want to do that.
Right.
If anything, I have to like hold them back at times. Um, Driven for sure. The people who seek out coaching are driven. Sometimes it's a wide range. Like definitely they're self-driven,
Mm.
but some people I've had come to me where there are so many resources, there are so many coaching resources, there's AI, and maybe they were using these programs and it was working for them for a couple months, but then they hit a plateau. And so they're like, well, I don't understand why I'm hitting this plateau. My performance isn't getting better. I'm fatigued. I'm following this program. It used to work. It's no longer working. And so they'll get a coach for that reason, where they don't know why something isn't working. I have a lot of people who, they're racing or doing group rides and they just want to get better and they don't know because they're getting, it's almost like this oversaturation of information now. Like we have so many resources and they go on a group ride and one person is telling them, oh, high cadence when you go up a hill, and another person's like, no, low cadence. And then they're like, well, which one is it? And I do both and I don't understand. And so I have a lot of people like that where they just want a coach to kind of help sort through all the information and help them zone in and tune into what works for them.
Yeah.
I would say the people who don't need a coach are the people who are doing what they're doing on their own and they're happy with it. They're seeing the improvements they want to see, the performance. And if you're in a good place, like, no, why get a coach? I've actually turned people down because I'm like, you know what? You do so many X amount of group rides. You are coaching yourself fine. Like, I'm not going to add anything to the equation. I don't want to take your money from you. Like just keep doing what you're doing. And if you reach that plateau, then you can contact me.
Kind of a Dave Osborne, that very talented guy who loves to use the group rides to get whatever he needs out of those rides, the local club rides, and then comes and races on the weekends. And I was very similar to Dave when I rode. I love to compete. Any time of the year, I was probably only 4 or 5 long rides away from being able to race. I never wanted to get out of shape because I always figured if I got out of shape and got hurt, I'd never get that shape back. So I was never one to lose fitness, and I knew that's not a way to maximize. So, you mentioned the last time we talked, I know a lot of your clients are over 50, and I was going to title this episode, and we've talked about 2025. One of my resolutions is Jill and I are going to get together a bunch of interesting episodes or our own podcast. But I know you have a lot of over 50 riders. Those are a lot of your clients. Is that still the case? Are you getting a bigger range in your demographic, or you still tend to focus on the older men?
Yes, I have a lot of older clients, a lot in their 50s, 60s, and several in their 70s.
Wow.
So And that fluctuates, like they come and go. But in general, I would say at least half of the athletes I have are over 50, if not more than half. So it's a huge population. It's an interesting population because, we know that as you age, you need more recovery, you need more rest, but at the same time, a lot of these people are retired. And so they just want to bike more and more and more. So it can be like I have to balance their motivations, their reasons for cycling. And a lot of them just cycle, they're not out to win races at age 50. The majority of 50 plus riders I'm coaching are not racing. Some are, but the majority just want to have fun and feel strong and have motivation and do well in the group rides. So I need to preserve that as a coach, that fun. Like I don't want to take away their group rides. I don't want to take away their fun of riding. So I'm not going to be like, oh, you need to rest a lot more. Like I only want you riding X amount of days per week. Like I try not to do that. I try to explain to them, these are the sacrifices you're making when you do 4 group rides per week, right? And these are the gains you can make. These are the gains you cannot make if you're doing 4 group rides per week. This is how much I can help you. And as long as they're aware of that, it's their choice whether they rest or they don't, or whether they do the structured training versus the group rides. So it's a very interesting population to work with because they are very driven. They have time. They're very strong.
They have
And
money.
then they have money, and we have to figure out the ways to preserve the performance with the fun. And as a coach, I like that. It's a puzzle. Each athlete I have is different, and you work with that athlete and you find their motivations and you figure it out together.
Yeah. Jill, do you feel you're just as um, effective in training like a 35-year-old racer, maybe a 25-year-old triathlete? People could come to you with lots of different needs. Have you gotten like an expertise in like the older athlete, or do you feel like you're still as effective on the wide range of types of athletes you'll encounter?
I feel I'm pretty effective on the wide range of athletes. There's certain athletes, certain populations right now I'm not working with, for example, juniors. And one of the reasons is I feel like there are some junior coaches who are very specialized in juniors. They know that world a lot more than me, and they're going to be a better coach for that junior. So I choose not to work with that population, but I will take on like the local racer in their 30s who does the local races around here because I know what that is like. I have done the local race scene. I know the people they're racing against. I know those courses. I know what it's like to do a crit or a stage race. So I've worked with many athletes who do that. So I can be a very effective coach for that athlete because I have lived that. I was a young person in my 30s racing, but I'm also very knowledgeable of the Gran Fondo scene, the travel trip scene. I'm not 50, but I am going through some life changes now where I'm feeling my body is aging. So I have my personal experience of that. I have also the studies I've done. I've worked with many athletes, so I know it by experience. So yes, I can do both those populations.
One thing you've helped me with, and I can imagine listening to you talk about your older athletes, they have more time and they tend to they will overtrain if you allow them to, or if you don't advise them correctly. You told me so. I used to run and then cycle on different days. So I had a good variety, but then running became very painful for me, my Achilles and just my hip, and riding was better. But then once I went to all riding, now I'm getting other types of injuries because I think I'm not getting the cross training anymore. So last time we talked, you recommended that cross training was effective and stretching has really helped me. I still haven't gotten back to that enjoyment on the bike I used to have because I still kind of hurt all over a little bit, but I'm getting better results because of stretching. Do you find with your older athletes you have to do research on other things that they can do in yoga, other types of sports that they can use to supplement at the time that they may have the available time that they have?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like all of my athletes, whether they're young or they're old, I'm recommending cross training, but more so for my older athletes. That's super important. Both stretching and strength. Strength is very, very important. And I am not a personal trainer. So I will not necessarily recommend a very specific program to them. I can, but I also like to tell them, most of them have a history with some kind of strength. So I'm like, use what you know. Let's talk together. Let's make a program. And one of the reasons I like them to kind of figure it out with my guidance is they're going to be more motivated to do that. If I just give them a program to follow, more often than not, they'll do it for like a couple weeks and then they'll kind of fade out. But if they find the app they like, or they find a personal trainer that they like to go to once or twice a week, where it's in person, or they find the YouTube videos, they're more likely to follow that. And then my job really comes in where do we fit this in? Because strength is tiring. You're working your muscles. So if you're trying to do a group ride the day after or a hard workout the day after, you might not hit those numbers and you might feel horrible. And we're not just biking for performance, we're biking for feeling. We want it to feel good and fun, at least the athletes I coach. So I'm just trying to find, how do we maximize everything with the limited time we have? But yes, like doing that stretching, doing that strength, I'd rather you give up a day of biking so you can fit in that cross training, especially for the older athlete.
Exactly. Well, Jill, I love to ride. I've been riding, all my life, and I've raced off and on, and but I've given it up and picked it back up. I've always come back to it. I'm a big fan of the professional game. I watch the big races, but one of the reasons why I ride is because I want to look good. Cycling is a way it gets your lower body in shape without really doing anything else unless you choose to. And I'm already inclined to have, stronger legs and I'm stronger, but it just enhances that. And what I have to do is I have to do some push-ups and some curls, other things to give my body balance. Otherwise, I'll be all, muscular legs and I'll be real thin with these real skinny arms up top. So I do both. Couple questions. Do a lot of your clients, they ride because they want to look good, or does the cycling become an end to itself? You start to ride and you just want to get better at riding. Everything you eat is because you want to be a better rider. All the riding is just about being about riding. It's not about fitness and how you look. Do you get a lot of that? A and B. How important do you think the weight training is to a cyclist, or at least to supplement your cycling?
Okay, so in terms of looking good, I've actually never had an athlete come to me and say, I want to hire you as a coach because I want to look better. I don't think actually any athlete has ever mentioned that I want to look better. They've mentioned, I want to be stronger, I want to lose weight, I want to feel good, I want to be healthier, I want to have motivation. So I think at the level where you're seeking out a coach, it's not to look good. Like if your focus is on looking good, you're probably going to be strength training, because when you're at the point of wanting a coach, like you're pretty far down that rabbit hole. Like you're pretty obsessed. And I think the people who just want to look good, they're going to be a little bit more diversified in their approach to things. So they probably wouldn't be hiring me. They'd probably be hiring like a nutritionist or a personal strength trainer or something. And then, sorry, what was the second part of this question? Oh, strength training.
Yeah.
How important is it? 100%. Like, I like it's crucial. Like, you will, as you mentioned, you were biking and you felt all these imbalances, and that's what's going to happen. You can probably maintain just cycling for a year or two, maybe even 3 years if you're young, but eventually those imbalances will catch up to you and your cycling performance will either stall or it might even go down and you're going to be in pain. And that is going to, sneak into your other daily life. That's another thing I try to maintain with my athletes. Like I am not coaching professional athletes. This is not their job. They're doing it for enjoyment and to enhance their life. And if they go too deep in the enjoyment and are not focusing on balance, then their future life will be compromised in some way. So I try to maintain that balance and be like, we need to make sure you're not just hyper focusing on one thing. So yes, to strength training.
Yeah. Well, a coach can be kind of a catch-all. Even like as you know, I talked to a lot of basketball coaches, football coaches, all kinds of coaches. They're more than just a coach. And in terms of like cycling, a coach would probably be being handle tactics, psychology. I'm down, I'm depressed, making them feel better. You talked about nutritionists, but you probably give nutritional advice to your clients. A coach, and just fitness, things they can do to get in better shape. If they're 20 pounds overweight at the beginning of the year and they want to race in March because the Jeff Cup is in March, you're talking about getting fit and losing that weight. So do you really work on staying in your lane, or do you allow your services to be a catch-all and kind of a full
Mm.
service of all the things that an athlete will need?
As a coach, at least the way I coach, I have to be a bit of a catch-all. Now, that comes with a caveat. Like, I will tell my athletes, I am not a nutritionist. I am not a personal trainer. I can give you guidelines of what to eat right before a ride, what to eat during, what to eat after. Like, that's huge. With all my athletes, I work on nutrition, because you can have the fittest athlete ever, and then they don't fuel correctly for their ride or race, and they derail everything they've worked hard for. So I need to some degree, be a little bit of a nutritionist for on the bike. Now, I tell them I am not a nutritionist off the bike. I can't tell you what to eat for dinner, beyond like your dinner pre-race, pre-event. Like, I can give you general guidelines, but if you want the details, if you really want to go into this deep, then I say hire a nutritionist, and here are the nutritionists that I recommend. Same for strength. Like, these are my guidelines. These are the basics. This is enough to make a very workable program, and you can stick with this and you'll get gains. But if you really, really want to target it, then here are the personal trainers I recommend. You mentioned the psychology, 100%. Like, racing is like, and performing well, it's 50% mind. It's not just body. If you don't have the mind, you're not going to be an effective racer, and you're probably not going to enjoy it. And again, we come back to the athletes I coach are doing this because they want to enjoy. So yes, I'm always working on that mindset and those tricks. And that's why the coaching I do, I'm very much in contact with my athletes on a regular basis, because to me, that's important to know where their mind is. And I'll have phone calls and we'll have messages and check-ins. And if it ever got to a point where it was beyond my expertise and like sort of my knowledge, self-knowledge, and from what I've read, if I'm not able to help that athlete, then I would direct them to a sports psychologist. I've actually never gotten to that point where I needed to direct someone there. But again, it's like I'm a bit of a catch-all to a certain point. And then if they need something beyond that, I would definitely say, hey, this is a team effort. I'm just a cycling coach, but there's so many other parts of this. And to reach this part, maybe you contact this person. And for that part, you need to contact this person.
Yeah. Well, just to remind folks, you're U.S. Cycling Power certified. You're peak training or training peak level 2 certified. Is that right? Did I say it right?
Yes.
Okay. You're a U.S. Cycling level 2 trainer. Train. So you are certified. Now, as we were talking about, some of these lines get blended, and you kind of advise amongst these silos of different aspects of performance. Do you also study nutrition? Do you put a lot of time into these other elements of what a fitness coach would do, what a dietitian would do? Do you spend a lot of time studying those
Oh,
aspects?
yes. I've read the books, the resources. I mean, there's so much out there. So, I've taken the general ideas, and sometimes they can sort of be at odds. And so I have to take what this person recommends and that person and this resource and that resource, and then apply it to my athlete. And every athlete's different. So maybe for one athlete, I'm taking this because that would work. For one athlete, I'm taking this and that would work. But yes, I'm always reading, especially with supplements. I try to stay up on those. I'm talking to people who personally use them around my life. I'm learning from that, but then I'm also looking at the resources. So, the science is changing, especially for female athletes. They're learning a lot more. They're doing specific studies on female athletes. So I try to definitely stay up to date with that. And one really interesting thing is, for example, nitrates, like the beets. For years and years and years, everyone was like, nitrates are great. They're one of the top 5 supplements for performance enhancement. And I believed that. And I took nitrates. I would recommend them to all my athletes. And then I read some recent studies on one of these websites that I really like, examine.com. It talks about all the studies on supplements, and it really kind of pinpoints everything and brings it all together. And they did some research on nitrates for women, because what they would do in the past, they would just research men basically and then just say, oh, it's true for everyone. Well, they tested women in nitrates, and they've found definite 100% gains for men. That's been proven. When they tested the women, they did not find the gains. Like 3 different studies did not find any performance
Hmm.
enhancements for women. And one actually found possible decreases in performance. So now the jury's out. For me, for my female athletes, I will say, you know what? Nitrates proven to work for men, for women, who knows? You can try them, you can take them. It might be a placebo. It's up to you. But yes, I do try to stay up on those studies.
Yeah. So when you we talked earlier that lots of your clients are men, but obviously you have female clients as well. Is it a very different challenge to advise a female athlete?
No, no, I get asked that question a lot, and people expect it to be different, but no, I would say they're very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about we talked a little bit about supplements, and you recommended some things to me at one point as well. Are there supplements that you recommend? You generally recommend folks for recovery, for
Mm.
joint issues, or just things that make you feel better on the bike?
Yeah, so for recovery, and everyone is different. Certain athletes I might recommend this, certain athletes I might not. It just kind of depends on who they are. Some athletes just do not want to take supplements, and great, that's you, you do you. But if they want to know about it for recovery, CBD, tart cherry juice, those are 2 big ones. I really like recently, I've been taking curcumin, and that's sort of a new one that's starting to trend. And I think that has a lot of potentials for recovery and just a lot of good things in general. Um, for performance, creatine, especially for older women, perimenopausal, menopausal women, it's been proven that creatine is one of the best supplements you can take, and not just for like muscle mass, preserving that. We all know it helps with the muscle, but they found that it actually helps brain activity, and it's good for your brain as your hormones are changing and as your body's changing. So that's a really good one for women, is the creatine. Caffeine is a huge one that can 100% help. But of course, I ask my athletes, like, are you a coffee drinker? Are you not? We need to figure out the dose, and you don't want to take it too soon in the event or the race, because you'll have the spike and then the lull. So we talk about how to use these, when to use them, if they want to use them. Um, yeah, I would say those are some of the big ones.
How about some foods that you recommend? You know, I've had lunch and you eat extremely healthy or intimidatingly healthy. But what are some of the foods you recommend to your athletes if you get involved in that at all?
Yeah, protein. That's a huge one. I mean, most athletes are, especially female athletes, can be low in the protein. So, and older athletes, that's another, in the 50 plus population. Like, we will go over their daily protein intake and kind of talk about when to take it, what types of proteins, are they getting enough? Especially if I have a vegetarian or vegan athlete, that's very important to talk about. And then, you know, they've found that a lot of athletes are actually under fueling, and eating more, they'll do better, especially in women, but not just women. I had a male athlete that um we were talking about his recovery, his performance, and he had kind of reached this just this stall where he wasn't seeing gains. And I suggested, we had worked on what he was eating during the rides and around the rides, but I suggested, you know what, like, I think going to a nutritionist to just kind of tune up what you're eating in daily life would be a very good idea. So he went to a nutritionist, and she basically pinpointed, you're not eating enough calories. So he ate more, and then suddenly his performance skyrocketed. So that's an example of, like, that was beyond my expertise, and I recommended he go someplace else, and he did, and it helped performance. So it came back to me. Like he went outward, and then what I was giving him could have a better effect because he found that other resource. So yeah, just like the amount of carbs, when you time them, how much carbs, protein, when, how much, very important.
Yeah. That reminds me of something that we all think about. Sometimes we don't eat as much when we're riding because we might want to lose a few pounds. So we're thinking that way. We figure we'll ride kind of on the empty stomach, not empty stomach, but empty-ish. And then we'll maybe eat afterwards, get a good ride in. So you're saying that could be counterproductive. If we eat
Oh
better
yeah.
before the ride,
Oh
we'll
yeah.
get a better ride and we'll burn those calories anyway, and your body will have better gains. So trying to lose the weight before the ride is probably counterproductive.
Yes, and we could have a whole podcast on this, but like there's definitely like if anything, I constantly am telling my athletes, I'm writing in their workouts, eat, eat, eat. And I give them I try to keep it simple. I try to say eat X amount of calories per hour. Like I don't even go into the carbs a lot of the times. I'm just like, just eat food, especially if we're in a base training period. You know, I just want them eating real food is best, but we'll talk about what they're eating. Um, but yeah, I would be a little bit more permissible of men wanting to do these fasted rides or going into a ride under fueled. It's been found that there can be some benefits for fasted rides for men, depending on what performance gains we're going for. Like it's very dependent on time of year, what the goal is, what workout you're doing the next day. I mean, it's all a big system. Women, I will never tell them to do a fasted ride. It's been proven that they highly do not recommend it. Now, that said, I had a female athlete. She was, I believe, in her 60s at the time, and she had been doing fasted rides for many, many years. And she was doing well, you know, these group rides. And I told her, you know, I think trying to eat more, let's just try it. Let's see what happens. Maybe we'll get some fitness gains from this. So she tried to eat more. She just felt sluggish. Her stomach was upset and she didn't see any performance gains. So we decided, you know what? Like, no, they don't recommend it. They don't recommend fasted rides to women. You've been doing it for years. We tried not doing it. Didn't work for you. I'm going to let you keep doing this. This works for you. So you be you and it works. Okay. So it's not like a hard and fast rule, and it's not like 100% you have to do this. It's about learning the athlete, but in general, people need to be eating more.
Well, that's something that I can do. You just talked about drinking more caffeine and eating more. So I think I'm in. I found the right coach. What about alcohol? Like, I have a dry January every year, which makes me long for February. But when I forget about those glasses of wine at lunch, and I lose weight quickly. I have more energy. I sleep better. It's like so obvious, but I don't know why I spend most of my time denying it. But do you talk about alcohol with your clients, and what are some of your recommendations? And how do you handle alcohol yourself in your own training?
So, okay, I'll start with alcohol myself. I used to have the occasional beer or wine, and I enjoyed that. But about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, like a lot of the people around me, because we're athletes, were very focused. They didn't drink. And so I just kind of stopped drinking. I don't have a hard and fast rule. Like I'll have a beer maybe a couple times a year, and that's about it. But once I stopped drinking, whenever I had a drink, I really felt it. Like I could, in the past, have one beer and feel fine. Now I have one beer and I'm like headachy. I don't sleep well. It's like my body lost all ability to deal with that alcohol. So for me, drinking is really not on the table anymore. But that said, of course, my athletes drink, not all of them, but many of them, and they enjoy it. And I don't necessarily ask them about their drinking habits. Sometimes they'll divulge, or sometimes, they'll say, hey, I had this group ride today and I felt horrible because I probably had too much to drink last night. Like they're aware, they know, they don't need me to tell them. But I am not. I mean, if an athlete wants to stop drinking, I will 100% support that. I think that in general, that's going to be healthier. But for some athletes, you have to remember that drinking is a stress relief. it's something they enjoy. So if I'm like, no, you should stop drinking, I'm taking away that enjoyment, that stress relief, that social activity for them. They finish a race, they want to drink a beer, go for it, like that's fun. And the benefits of that social activity, that relaxation, the stress relief might outweigh the negative of the alcohol. We all know the negatives. And then I'll say the one thing I would say to them is if you're going to have that drink, have it at like 5 p.m., not 8 p.m., right? Give yourself a couple hours before you sleep because that is hugely true. Alcohol hugely disrupts your sleep. And a lot of my athletes, they have Whoop or they have the Aura Ring, the HRV or the Apple Watch, and you can see it in your sleep quality when you drink. So that's all they need. They just need to do one drink right before bed, have horrible sleep, see the stats, and then they're like, okay, don't want to do that.
That's very interesting. Your advice with respect to alcohol is like your advice with respect to group rides. You want your athletes to have fun and enjoy life and
Mhm.
not make cycling and your coaching a burden. So, note to all the people out there who need a coach, you can drink and you can work with Coach Patterson here. So make sure
Yeah.
you keep her in mind. Let's go to New Year's resolutions.
Mm.
So I'm a big New Year's resolutions guy because it is a way to try to redefine yourself. Now, does it always work? No, but a couple things that I've done over the years. I remember one year I wanted to clean my car every day when I left. When I parked my car, I cleaned it up, and I did it for the whole year, and that became part of my behavior. A few years ago, several years ago, I would load the dishwasher every night before I went to bed, every night, and then I would unload it every day when I got up, and that's something I've retained. And I do the same thing. I have a dry January every year. I work out every single day in January. So I do try to get my year off to a great start. And I also create goals at work, make certain number of calls. I'm in sales. I do the same thing. I find it a great way to try to redefine yourself. And whenever I talk to people, they'll say, "Oh, I don't believe in resolutions. It's stupid." I'm just like, "Well, I don't see the downside. Here I am trying something new, and I'm using this." Anyway, what about you? Do you do New Year's resolutions? Do you think this is a good way to kind of reset and reframe your approach?
So for me, I don't make resolutions specific to New Year. I'm kind of constantly thinking about resolutions because I'm that growth mindset. And same with a lot of my athletes. Like we're in our check-ins, our coaching check-ins, I'm always sort of asking, okay, how was your performance? How, like, did you meet your goals? What are your next goals? What's the next step? We're always thinking about how we can evolve. But that said, I definitely come New Year, like it's a time when I am thinking about a little bit more and I sort of focus on it a little bit more. And I do definitely have some resolutions that I want to try for next year. And I tend to start thinking about them around the end of the year. And the same for a lot of my athletes, I find, because it actually works well for the race season. Races kind of die off come September, October, November. Then we have this lull, and then maybe in March they start up again. So usually in December, around the holiday time, that's a time when I call it a decompression period. I recommend this for many of my athletes, where it's 2, 3, maybe even more weeks where they're either completely off the bike. Some of them do that. But most of them want to bike a little bit. But we really peel back on the biking, like fewer days, less intensity, no structure, just free rides if they ride, and then really try to push the cross training, like do other things, go hiking, do your yoga classes, go rock climbing, like get back into strength training. And it's sort of this reset period. And then at the end of the decompression period, right around now, in fact, I just got off a call with an athlete where I was like, okay, decompression 3 weeks is over. Now we're starting the new year. What are your goals? What are your next races? What are we working towards? And so it's very much like a New Year's resolution thing. And just because of the racing season and event season and the group ride season, it tends to happen right around New Year's.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit, Jill, about indoor cycling, which is there's a lot of options now, a lot more than ever. With the Peloton and other types of rides and the cycling classes that people can do, kind of give them a group feel for those who need that. Now, so I every day when I have to ride on indoors, I'll listen to a podcast. I listen to our last conversation that we had on the bike. As much as I enjoyed our dialogue, I don't enjoy my 30 minutes on the bike. But it's a way for me to get exercise and I get a great sweat. It works. It's not as productive as my hour. I do an hour and a half ride outside. It's not as productive as that, but it's something. And when I go back outside, I don't feel like I've missed anything by doing this little half-hour ride. But what about you? What are some of the recommendations that you make? First, let's talk a little bit about Pelotons and rollers, trainer stands. Let's first focus on the type of indoor riding apparatus that we can use.
Okay, so yeah, we have the Peloton bike, which a couple of my athletes use that. If I had to choose a bike like the Peloton, I probably wouldn't choose that. That's not really as real world biking. Like I want them on a road bike with the gears and but it is very doable for them to use a Peloton. I've had athletes do that. I would say my recommendation for indoor trainers would either be like the Kicker or the Zwift bike, where you have the actual bike and it's all built in. But the important thing is that you match that fit to whatever bike you're riding in the real world. Like I just need that consistency between the different bikes you use. Another great option is hook up your bike to the indoor trainer. That's the option I personally use. It's the cheaper option. You can get the wheel on trainer where you keep the wheel on and it kind of rolls against this little roller thing. I do not recommend that. As a coach, if I have an athlete who has that type of trainer, I will really try to encourage them to get rid of that trainer because I found it is not accurate. The consistency is not there. So if you really want to do consistent good training, I would get the direct drive, the rear wheel you take off. If you have that, that's a great trainer. And those are very affordable now. There are lots of options. And of course, rollers are awesome. Rollers are great. You can get smart rollers, which I do think if you're going to invest in a trainer at this point, get a smart trainer. Spend a little bit more money because then you're just opening the options up with the Zwift and the group rides and this and that. Like it's going to be a lot more interesting than the dumb trainers. So spend that money, it's worth it. The smart rollers, great option. The only thing is you have to really pay attention when you're on those rollers unless you get the attachment. So you need to be willing to pay attention. Like for me, I don't want to think about balance. I literally, for a lot of my workouts, I'll set it in erg mode and I'll watch a movie. And I cannot do that on rollers. I would have to focus too much for me. And I'm not willing to do that. So knowing my willingness of what I'm willing to do and not do on the indoor trainer, that would influence my choice.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the workout itself. There was a time when I used to race. I would try to make gains inside. I would do like some, 2 to 5 minute intervals where I would just destroy myself. Level five, or it's been so long since I really trained, but I know you know what I'm trying to say. But now I just try to maintain a level of fitness and just keep myself in shape enough when I ride outside. It's not that painful. What about you? Do you recommend indoor people try to make actual gains? You said you're watching a movie, you're not really focused that much, or do you recommend like me to use the indoor just to kind of maintain your fitness?
Really depends on what you want. For you, I would say let's maintain that fitness. But then if you get to a point where you're like, this is so boring, I might be like, well, let's spice it up and add some hefty intervals because as hard as they are, when you finish doing that interval, there's this sense of pride and you get
Yeah.
that rush of endorphins and like maybe bringing that once a week would add some spice and make you not hate the indoor trainer as much, right? And there are different ways to add those intervals now because Zwift and Training Peaks Virtual, they have so many amazing resources now that I'm tapping into that as a coach. For example, like winter is a lot of steady state longer intervals, 30 plus minutes at this quasi steady power. That can be extremely mind numbing indoors. Some athletes, I'm like, do 30 minutes at this power and they just knock it out. They're like, great, done. And they love it. Some athletes are like, this is like torture. So then, as a coach, I'll devise like these over unders or little variations just to give them mental. It's not even the physical. It's trying to give them some mental stimulation to help them get through this interval. Or I might say, hey, you have a 30 minutes at this amount of power, do it on a Zwift hill climb. And for some people, that's a great way to do it. Like they're watching their power, but they feel like they're actually climbing a hill. Or they use Ruby where it's real world and they like that. Or I'm like, you know what? You have to do an hour and a half endurance ride. I can just give you an hour and a half of endurance. Or maybe you do this pace partner group ride where it keeps you at X watts per kilo and it's a little bit more mentally stimulating. Or we'll even talk about like what TV shows to watch or what podcasts to listen to. Like, and then as far as the intensity, like, do I add intensity? It just really depends on what they're going for. I have some athletes who they're actually peaking right now because they're doing the online racing series. So it's not a base training period for them. It's all about the high power intervals. And one of their goals is to do well in these races. So it's not like they don't want to train for these races. They want to go into them in good form. So those athletes, yes, I'm giving them intensity. I'm growing their fitness. So it's really, truly dependent on where that athlete is in their fitness journey.
Yeah. Well, Jill, you're referencing some of the numbers that you look at. One thing I forgot to ask earlier is how and you mentioned AI earlier. How scientific, how technical is coaching getting? Is it getting more and more by the numbers, complicated? I know with Lance Armstrong, Chris Carmichael, that's when we first started wearing heart rate monitors. We started, talking about power and other measures, not just heart rate. But is that continuing to take off? Is it getting more and more like that?
This is a great question. So
Thanks.
to me, coaching is an art. When I started, coaching was a science for me
Interesting. So it went back.
because I didn't know the art of it. I hadn't done
Oh,
it enough to know the art. So I had to rely on the science because I didn't have the experience as a coach. So for the first year, it was all about the numbers. And then as I had more athletes, as I had more personal experiences, as I saw all these differences come out and I collected a lot more data points, then I could get away from the numbers. So 50% is fitness. 50% you can get by following that AI program with the numbers. But what happens when you get sick? What happens when you have life stress, work stress? What happens when you're really down on yourself because you didn't do well in a race? What happens with the tactics? There's so much in the fueling. Like this is where AI can't help you really. That's where it's going to fail. So they're trying to push all these AI programs and they're trying to make it like, oh, how did you feel today? Give me a star 1 to 5. And they're using that. But really, truly, this is why people can benefit from a coach. If you have a very regular schedule, you know yourself, you're a very habitual person, great. Stick with AI, that's going to do it for you. But in my opinion, it will never truly be a full coaching experience if you're just going by the numbers.
that's great advice. Well, let's talk a little bit about Jill. Last time we talked, you were on the heels of another national championship. So you'd had a good season. I think you had all kinds of trips that winter. So it was crazy time for you. Where are you in your fitness journey? I think at that time you told me you're probably going to race seriously in a couple of years for a couple more years, and then maybe focus even more on your athlete success and less on your own personal success. I think that's what you told me. But
Yeah.
anyway, where are you now in your fitness journey, and what do you see ahead for you in the next few years in terms of your riding?
Yeah, so you actually kind of answered that question. Yes, I am pulling back from the racing and focus more on my coaching and my athletics. So my personality is when I do things, I really like to do them. Like I throw myself into it. So for racing, I really, for many years, I was aiming for this top level. And at the same time, I was racing, I was developing my coaching. But of course, as a new coach, I didn't have that many athletes. I wasn't as busy. But I got more and more athletes. I got better at coaching. I got more well known as a coach. So then my athletes kind of got up here. And to do two things at that high level it's too much. I can't maintain both racing at this high level and coaching at the level I've brought it to. So something has to give, and I'm not willing to let my coaching down. Like I've worked hard to bring it up to here. I want to maintain it here. I want to even go up here. So yes, the racing, it's a good time for me to bring the racing down. Like my goal with racing was always to see what my personal peak was. I wanted to know how good can I be. And in retrospect, I think I was at that peak about 2, 3 years ago. That was my peak. I don't think I'm going to reach that peak again. Perhaps I could, but I also know because I reached that peak at one time, I know the sacrifice, I know what it would take to reach that peak again. And I'm just not willing to give it that much right now. I would rather give my time and energy to my coaching and my athletes and let them reach their peaks.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have experienced it. So I'm lucky in that I can say I gave it my all. And I will never regret that because if I hadn't given my all, I always would have been left with this feeling of what could I have done? But I saw what I could do. And that's a great feeling.
Yeah. Do you think, and you may not know this at this point, do you think you have other athletic goals? Like, for example, I always told myself when I got away from cycling, when I got 55 again, or maybe I said 50, I forgot what it was. I'd get back into racing and do masters. I never did, but I said that. I did that for 5Ks. I did some over 55Ks and I was very competitive, but I kept getting hurt. But what about you? Do you think you'll have athletic goals in the future?
Yeah, and actually, I do think about the masters races because before I was going for the overalls. I was like, I'm not going for age group. I want to win this thing. And I did, and I had lots of successes. But now I can feel my age. It's getting a lot harder. I'm 43. I'm going to be 44 racing age next year. It's so much harder to get an overall when you're competing against 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. So but I also think I'm too close to that transitional stage. Like I can't go from a year or two ago, I won the overall to now I'm going for age group. Like it's just for me, that mental transition feels like too much of a step down.
Mhm.
And I can't do it that quickly. So I think I need to just kind of take a break for a couple of years. And then, yeah, in the future, maybe I'll be really excited to go for some age group stuff.
43, you make me sick. Cry me a river. No, you're doing great. So let's talk about let's maybe end on your career. Now, it's great to know that you're getting the clients that you deserve. You have a wonderful personality, and I'm sure your clients are thriving and just enjoy working with you immensely. What are some of your other goals or things you like to implement as a coach? What is like, did you want to write a book or what are some other things you want to do in your career as a, and podcast? And me and you've been floating out there for a long time, but some of your other career goals, maybe.
So this goes back to New Year's resolutions, and this is actually definitely one of my resolutions this year is to focus this energy on my career and figure out the next steps because I have gotten to a place where I'm very comfortable now. I kind of felt like I was like just exhausted for many years, just trying to like get a hold of things, catch up. Like it was almost like my business was like leading me, like it was just carrying me, and I was just like holding on as like I wasn't even trying to get more athletes. They were just coming to me, and I was like, okay, I'll take you on, and it was just scrambling to keep up. Now I feel like I'm at a very comfortable place with it. Like I've settled.
That's
I'm
awesome.
happy. I've diversified in my life. Like I'm not overwhelmed. And now is a good time to start thinking about, okay, now that I'm comfortable, I can take the next step and I can drive it, right? Before it was sort of just driving me. Now I make those choices. What those choices are, I don't know, but I have the time and the energy now to do that. So that is my goal, is to figure out what those next steps are.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Great, Jill. Well, look, as always, I love talking to you. Amazing education, and every time I talk to you, I learn something that I can use myself in my own training and fitness. Just enjoy the dialogue. It's wonderful following you on Facebook because your life for a cyclist is fun, and you get to
Mm.
travel and you meet people and you're always smiling. So it's always a joy to follow you and your on your social media. You do such a wonderful job. But I just, thanks for jumping on and doing this again. It's been wonderful, and I hope we can, keep doing these episodes and maybe try something else one of these days.
Yes, I would love that. It's always awesome to talk with you. You just know the questions to ask. Like you get
Oh.
right down into the perfect questions. So it's always fun to talk with you.
Well, thanks for saying that. It's wonderful. You always have you always have a great answer, and it's funny. I think one thing that people will see is that you ask great questions yourself. You're very inquisitive, and I think you're going to be a wonderful host yourself. So, but anyway, Jill, this is great. I hope to see you in the new year, and just best of luck with everything, and thanks again for doing this.
Thanks so much, Julian.
You're welcome. Take care now, Jill.
You too.